Hello, everyone. Welcome to Keen Ear and Happy New Year. I know it's a little bit late to announce such a thing. Currently, the time making this video, it's the final day of January. In fact, I'm so far behind that I've actually missed both New Year's and Chinese New Year's as well. So it's kind of an achievement within itself. That, but yeah, like I said, Happy New Year, everyone. Better late than never, and that kind of thing. So we'll begin this year. We'll crack open this year with Vinyl Tag 2023, similar to last year, really. This is going to be 20 questions from the mastermind, Rob Walker. He came up with last year's questions that I followed anyway, and I'm going to do the same this year. So some good ones in here, some ones which I struggled with, in all honesty, but we'll get to them later. We'll begin, of course, with first and foremost with question number one, which has to show a favourite album from last year. That was new, fresh on the shelves, and out of the handful or so albums I listened to last year that were new, this is probably my favourite album. It has maybe the edge on it. It's Miles Kane's latest, Change the Show. I do quite like this album. I checked it out quite a bit when it first came out. It came out early 2022, and then I listened to it again recently a few weeks ago. And yeah, I like the production. It's very catchy in places. It's kind of an album that puts a bit of a smile on my face, which is, I'm kind of a grumpy person generally, so yeah, that does take some doing for me personally. And it's a fun album. It really is. Whether it's my absolute favorite album of last year kind of remains to be seen. I'm yet to get my hands on a Brian Eno album that came out last year, which I'm kind of a bit keen to check out. Apparently, it's got quite a lot of Eno's vocal work on it, which is pretty rare for Eno albums. But anyway, we'll move on to question number two, which is the last band or solo artist you saw live. The last band that I saw live was a few days ago. And it was The Darkness, and it was a great show. Really enjoyed it. The only thing is I don't have any albums or anything like that to show of The Darkness. It was kind of a spare of the moment thing to go and see them, quite honestly. So I don't have anything by The Darkness. And the last band I saw before that was actually a band that don't have, they're not signed, they don't have a record deal or anything like that. So they've got no albums or, CDs or anything like that. So I can't show that. So we'll go back to the band that I saw before that, which goes all the way back to October of last year, which feels like a long, long time ago. Not sure why that is, because it kind of it isn't that long ago. But it was Roxy Music, and this was a bit of a bucket list group to see live. Very happy I managed to finally do it. Saw them over in Manchester. It was the first tour that they did, I believe, in about 20 years or so. So yeah, it was definitely something that went ahead when it was announced it was going to happen. I thought it probably might well be, potentially, who knows, my final chance to see Roxy Music, particularly with the lineup that we've still got to this day, which is a pretty there's not many bands from that era where there's so many members that are still alive. They've almost got the original lineup when you think about it, which is pretty incredible, give or take the key members anyway. So we'll move on to the first album that was the best, question number three. With this one, I feel like if I had more punk albums, I'd probably be able to, come up with a lot more options. I kind of honestly really did struggle quite a bit with this, because I was thinking the Beatles, no, the Rolling Stones, no, David Bowie, absolutely not. And then I kind of, after looking through my entire collection, I came up with this. This is Nevermind the Bollocks by the Sex Pistols, and I feel like punk is probably the best suited for this line of question, because when a punk group starts out, the most the most youthful, the most kind of aggressive, the most angry, angsty, amateurish, all these things work in punk's favour, really. So I think if the Sex Pistols would have hung around, and if, say, they released 10 albums, I couldn't imagine the 10th one that they put out after all those hours and hours of studio experience and all that kind of thing. I don't know if they would have survived that long as a group, together. But just imagine if they did. I couldn't imagine being as good as this, or having the shock value and all that kind of thing that this album has. So yeah, the Sex Pistols' first and only album, I think, is arguably their best and probably the worst as well, because it's the only one they've got, so it's everything. It's the best, it's the worst, it's the first, it's their last. Well, that's the best I could do with that line of question. Like I said, if I had more punk, if I had more punk albums and more into that, more maybe into metal or all that kind of thing, maybe I'd have more options. But that's the best I can do. So anyway, moving swiftly on to question number 4, which is a hat trick show an album that I've got on vinyl, I've got on maybe CD and cassette and all that. I don't actually have this album on vinyl, but I do have it on CD, and I have it on cassette twice. I'll show this CD first and foremost. This is The Gold Experience by Prince. Bit of a favourite album from Prince. You know, it's one of his. I consider it one of his better albums. That's why I've got so many copies of it. Got on cassette as well. This is the first time. You know, this is the first means that I listened to it on cassette. And I also have this. This is a bit of a cheat, I suppose, to a degree, because this is not technically the album again on cassette. It's basically a remix. It's called the Versace Experience. This is a Record Store Day from, I believe, 2019. And yeah, it's like a remix of the songs from the Gold Experience. It was actually released as a Record Store Day on vinyl for the first time since it first came out. You know, since it first originally was released, and I was very tempted to pick her up, but I just didn't really. And I think it's quite pricey now. Like what happens to a lot of Record Store Day exclusives. I might pick her up, I might not. I'm not sure. You know, I've got enough versions of her, I feel like. But if I did pick her up back in Record Store Day last year, I'd have like 4 copies, I suppose, technically, maybe. But anyway, question number 5, an album that starts and ends with the same letter. And this is the first one that, you know, I saw, so I jumped on it really. You know, A Night at the Opera by Queen. You know, it starts with an A, and then you got the A in opera at the end. So yeah, begins and ends in A. So we'll move on to someone born in the same year as me. I look through all the names of people who were born, you know, the same year as me, you know, on Wikipedia. And quite honestly, you know, 98% of them, I've got no idea who they are. Quite honestly. So I went with, in the end, Miles Kane yet again. You know, second time showing him. He wasn't born in the same year as me. He was actually born in the year before me. But it's the closest I can do, particularly in terms of stuff that I've got. Records and things that I've got. It's the best you're gonna get, I'm afraid. You know, most of my collection is from the 70s and 60s and all that. You know, and I was born in the 80s, so. Yeah, I don't really. It's slim pickings for me personally. So anyway, we'll move on to question number 7. Most listened to album of 2022. I'm not sure if this, is the true, album I should be showing, because quite honestly, when it comes to the amount of times I've listened to a particular album, I've got no idea. It really is. You know, because any of these albums I'm showing, I couldn't tell you how many times I've listened to them. You know, I know which albums I've listened to a lot, and I know which albums I've listened to only a few times. But anyway, this is probably the album, to hold it the right way, that I've listened to the most last year, whichever way you hold it. But yeah, I think it's Blonde on Blonde by Bob Dylan. Great album, and I remember having a bit of a Bob Dylan sort of marathon listening sessions with him, and that was always on the turntable. So we'll move on to number 8, is it? Most listened to artist in 2022. And I think this one's more accurate than the Bob Dylan one that I've just shown. It's Prince. And yeah, probably listen to more Prince, really. Not necessarily this album, just Prince in general. Got most of this stuff actually on CD. And yeah, I'm trying to get hold of all the Prince albums that were ever released, physically anyway. And, you know, with some buying so many of them, I've been checking them out as well. And yeah, just listening to a ton of Prince. I must have listened to over 100 hours easily of Prince last year. So we'll move on to question number 9, which is to show an Australian band or artist. And I believe last year there was a question to show, for some reason it stuck out, to show an artist or band that they're from outside of America or the UK. And I went for Australia, and I went for AC/DC. So this is similar to, for some reason I can remember that. I don't know how, but I can remember that question. So it's somewhat relatable to this question, from a year later. So I'm not going to show AC/DC like I did last year. I'm going to show instead the Bee Gees. Now, before everyone comments, in the comment section, the Bee Gees weren't from Australia. I know they were born in Australia, but they spent quite a long time in Australia. I believe from the mid-50s. Also, the family moved out to Australia, and they spent a number of years living in Australia. I believe they were all born, all three brothers. They were in the band mostly anyway. Were born in the Isle of Man, so they are technically British, I suppose. But yeah, they did spend some time growing up in Australia. And yeah, as you can probably tell, I don't have many albums or anything like that from Australian bands. So we'll move swiftly on once again to question number 10, which has to show a record people would be surprised you purchased last year. And this is where I picked up at the tail end, really, of 2022. It's U2's How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb, an album that was originally released back in 2004. And the reason why people might be surprised that I'm showing this, if you watch my videos regularly, I posted a video sometime last year talking about problematic bands, and one of the bands that are listed was U2. Where I did make it clear that I only really have one issue with U2, which is one song. Kind of fine with everything else. But regardless of that, you might be somewhat surprised that U2, pick up something by U2 after saying that, I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of them, which I kind of am not, but I do actually quite like their album to a degree. I think it's pretty good. Some good stuff on it. So anyway, we'll move on to question number 11, an artist or band you're complete on. I just pulled this out. There's a few artists that I've got a complete collection of. Beatles, for instance, T-Rex, there's a couple of others maybe, but anyway, the Stones are probably my best achievement so far anyway, in terms of obtaining all. I've got all the Stones albums, not all on vinyl, but I think most of them are on vinyl. There's a few of the later ones are on CD. What I do have at this point in time, all the Rolling Stones studio albums, which I'm quite happy with. I'm quite happy I managed to put the commitment in and get all their studio records. They don't actually have a ton, considering they've been around for as long as they have, longer than pretty much every band that's ever existed. So we'll move on to question number 11. A great run of 3 albums. I decided to go for not only a great run of 3 albums, I've decided to go for the best run of 3 albums, which I can kind of think of, really. I think this is arguably the best that there's ever been in the history of popular music. You got the Beatles' Rubber Soul, 1965, and then you can see where this is going, of course. You got a Revolver, and then you've got Sgt. Pepper's. Can you get a better series of 3 records than that? I don't think it's possible. So that's what I've gone with. The best of the best, I suppose. So I'll move on to question number 13. 80s soundtrack, or just show your favourites or whatever. So I've gone for an 80s soundtrack that I'm particularly fond of. In fact, I actually think this is the best. It is my favourite soundtrack. Whether it's the best one, that's debatable, but it's definitely my favourite. And it's Blue Velvet, 1986. It's not actually a very 80s sounding album, this, at all. It's actually very Hitchcockian, and it's definitely inspired by the soundtrack of Hitchcock. You think of Vertigo and all that kind of thing. It's got that kind of element to it, and there's earlier stuff from like the 30s and the 40s and the 50s as well, of course. So we'll move on to question 14. We lost them in 2022. So I looked through the list of people who died. One of the names that came up, I looked on Wikipedia for the people who died last year, and kind of shockingly, really, Paul McCartney came up. I was like, I must have missed that event somehow. must have had collapsed for a fortnight and just forgot it happened, but whatever. But no, he didn't. Paul McCartney didn't die, of course, last year. So yeah, you got to be careful what you search for online. It's not always true, which may shock some people, but it really is. Where the Foo Fighters drummer, I believe his name is Tyler Hawkins, is it? Yeah, Taylor Hawkins. Sorry, I'm not a huge Foo Fighters fan. This was the first thing that came up to actually have something physical to show. Thankfully, a lot of the artists that I collect for, none of them died. But then again, a lot of the artists that I collect for are already dead and have been dead for many years. So there's also that way of looking at it. So yeah, we sadly lost the drummer of Foo Fighters last year, and that's the one I went for, even though I'm not a huge Foo Fighters fan. So we'll move on to question number 15, disappointing purchase of 2022. I went for this. This is Paul McCartney's Press to Play. The reason why I've gone for this isn't necessarily to do with the music. I'm actually coming around to the music quite a bit. I'm actually starting to like it. It's growing on me, shall we say. But the reason why I've put it as disappointing is because I bought this cassette. I don't know if this is the one because I actually got 2 copies of this cassette at this point in time. But yeah, I bought this on eBay, and it wasn't playable at all. In certain points of the cassette, it would just stop. I tried fixing it, and I just couldn't fix it, and it made myself frustrated and annoyed by it. And then I decided to just go out and buy another copy. The annoying thing is, though, I bought it on eBay, and it wasn't working properly, and I knew it wasn't working properly, and I left positive feedback. Just one of those things that you look back on, you think, what the hell was I playing at with that? But anyway, Paul McCartney's Press to Play, that was the disappointing part of, in terms of collecting music last year, that was the most annoying part, and I'm kind of glad that it's very, very trivial. It shows that I'm in the right hobby. If something as trivial as that was the worst thing that happened last year, it means record collecting and collecting all this stuff isn't as bad as maybe feared at one point. But anyway, next question is disappointing. We've done that one. Non-vinyl purchase of last year, number 16, a book or a CD or whatever. I don't think many people will be shown one of these. I think this is a fairly unique answer. I was going to go with a book, which I'll kind of actually show later on, but I'm going to go with this instead. This is a recent pickup. Not many people have got this, I guarantee. Particularly a sealed copy, which is what this is. This is the Rolling Stones Voodoo Lounge CD-ROM. Yes, a CD-ROM. Imagine there's a lot of people out there who don't even know what a CD-ROM is. Something that's killed off by the internet. Very popular in the 1990s. And yeah, Rolling Stones CD-ROM. Definitely it's not the album. This is it's not the Voodoo Lounge album, but it's got music videos and that kind of thing. It's a bit of promotional material, really, to go with the album. That was very popular. It's actually a very good album. Voodoo Lounge, I did quite like that one. So we'll move on to the next question, of course. So I try to bide some time to see which question we're up to, because my memory only lasts for a few seconds. It's number 18, we're nearly there. Space-themed album or sleeve or song or whatever. And I've gone for... Oh, sorry. We'll do this one and then we'll move on to the one I should have gone for. But this is the next one. It's the space-themed one. Ziggy Stardust, David Bowie, of course, for obvious reasons. I don't know how many people have gone for this one. Where it's, you've got David Bowie there as an alien. Sent down from Mars by the spiders or whatever to save humanity or do whatever the androgynous alien. So we'll move on to the one I should have gone, which is the Grail. And this isn't a Grail really technically, because I wasn't really looking for it, just sort of stumbled upon it randomly. But it's Al Green's I'm Still in Love with You from 1972. And yeah, it's I paid £22 for it, as you can see there, from a record shop in Liverpool. And the reason why I've got this as the Grail is because it's the condition of it's absolutely fantastic. It's a 1972 original, and it's in shrink wrap. It's in this sort of wrapper, but it is shrink underneath, and it's pretty much mint. It sounds fantastic as well. There's barely a mark in it. It's kind of like you went to 1972 and bought a brand new record, opened it and played it. It's that sort of condition, original in a sleeve, and it's just one of those sort of wow records that you kind of can't believe how good it is, how good the condition is. You know, if I was after that album, probably never would have found it in that condition. Never. I just sort of stumbled upon it. Couldn't resist it. So, question number 19, which is some present or whatever that you got. I'm going to show this. This is a book that my brother bought me last year. It weighs an absolute ton. It's the Paul McCartney, the lyrics. And yet I'm yet to read this. It's something I kind of forgot I had. Sort of pour it somewhere because it weighs a ton. I've got to be careful where I pour it, and I don't want it getting damaged and that sort of thing. So I kind of pour it in the corner somewhere and forgot I had it. So I need to check that out. I need to read. I've only flicked through it months and months ago. But yeah, that was the thing I was going to use for one of the questions, a non-vinyl pickup of last year, but I decided to go for the CD-ROM. But anyway, I'm rattling on. We'll move on to question number 2, which is to show an album released in 1973. And I haven't shown any Marc Bolan in this video, and I feel like some Marc Bolan needs to be shown. So I've gone for Tanks 1973, the last great Marc Bolan album, 34 Hours as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, the end of T-Rexity and the glam rock era, really, the true glam rock era sort of ended really with this album. There or thereabouts anyway. So, thanks for watching everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed me going through all these questions and things. Hopefully I've come up with some fairly decent answers and that kind of thing. Thanks for Rob Walker for coming up with these. It's not easy. It really isn't easy coming up with these. So many of them been done before, and you don't want to do the same questions over and over again. And I think he's done quite a good job of coming up with 20 mostly unique, pretty unique ones. So yeah, well done, Rob. Hopefully, there's some time for other people to take part in this who haven't had a chance yet. And yeah, I've enjoyed the ones I've seen so far. So thanks for watching, everyone. And like I said earlier in the video, Happy New Year and goodbye.